There's a concept of just creating associations. I'll look around my office right now and I've got a tripod and I've got a TV. And let me just ask you a question right now. Which one is more important to you? A tripod or a television? And take a moment to yourself and really consider which one is more important to you. And here's the funny thing about this. If I tried now to convince you otherwise, you probably wouldn't agree with me. And you just invented that logic in your brain right now. You know your business can change people's lives, but you don't yet have the right words to inspire them to take action. Imagine the changes you will create in your business as you tap into the secrets of ethical influence and positive persuasion to not only better serve your clients, but also to supercharge your financial freedom. I'm your host, Jason Linett, and welcome to the Hypnotic Language Hacks podcast. I help entrepreneurs and business owners just like you to close more premium sales. And no, this isn't about tricking or manipulating people, not at all. It's about helping your prospects to appropriately sell themselves into your products or services. Please hit subscribe and get all the episodes now at jasonlinett.com. We create memories. We create associations. We create beliefs in our minds by simple cause and effect relationships. And think about this for a moment. In terms of your business, people are looking at making a specific buying decision, whether or not they're going to make use of your product, whether they're going to make use of your service. And it's the nature of the mind that we're always looking for associations. We're looking for connections. We're basically looking for meaning inside of all that we do, which is why today, episode number 3, Cause and Effect for Business Relationship, we're going to go into the details of the foundations of all things hypnotic influence. Before we get started today, if you want to easily grab people's attention, naturally build authority, and organically have your prospects wanting more from you, even before you make an offer, I've created a step-by-step strategy to help you to do just that. I call it the Video Influence System. This is your opportunity now to discover my highly effective, entirely free, on-demand workshop at jasonlinett.com. It's specifically for entrepreneurs who want to deliver premium value to their clients to receive premium value in return. If you want a proven framework to boost your confidence and deliver value every time you go on camera, get the Video Influence System now at jasonlinett.com. Before we get started, let me please just take like a minute or two to give you a very important disclaimer. Please only ever use your powers for good. And I say that part jokingly, not to imply you actually have magical powers, though as a result of many of these hypnotic influence methods, it may feel as if you do. Now, the mindset here is always build towards a mutual, beneficial, positive outcome, where both you as the person who owns the business, the person who's driving the sales, you're pleased because you're selling your products or services at an appropriate premium rate. Meanwhile, on the other side of the equation, think about the changes in your business as now that person at the end of the equation is now thanking you for selling them this thing, and then even years later continues to be that raving fan of what you do. That should always be our goal. That should always be our outcome. So once again, please only ever use your powers for good. That being said, what I'm about to share with you is, in my opinion, the foundation of all influential language. This is the foundation of all persuasion because it's simply the nature of how our minds work. We learn through association. We learn through creating new connections within our minds. And allow me to briefly nerd out on neuroscience here, because you might have heard of something called Hebb's Law, which even if you haven't heard the term Hebb's Law, you've maybe heard this phrase. Neurons that fire together, wire together. So think about the nature of, again, how we learn, as perhaps we create these cause and effect relationships in our minds, right? When I pay my taxes on time, the government doesn't come after me for my money. When I eat in a healthy way and exercise regularly, my body becomes more slender and I feel more fit. And as my body feels more fit and healthy, I feel more confident in how I feel and how I look. We create these correlations, we create these connections, which, yes, have been validated elsewhere by science and even by the government, as it is in that taxes example. But still, through our own sort of individual experiences, we're constantly creating cause and effect relationships. And here's the thing. The most influential language you can create are not the belief systems that you suggest. It's instead the belief systems that you can inspire in someone else's mind. So do you see now why I give you that disclaimer before we get into this? Now, let me start to set a foundation here, because just in case you may have come across these concepts in other parts of the world, you might have heard other terminologies, other words applied to these very simple principles, which we're going to start to level up in terms of how we can use this and how we can stack that influence in our business communication. For the sake of most of my communication with you, I'll refer to it as cause-effect relationships. But then again, we can take the same two concepts and just apply different filters, different labels on top of this. So in a few moments, you're going to have like 3 variations that are all the same thing. So don't get too caught up in the jargon and the terminology. This is, again, a very simple concept. I just want to give you all the vocabulary so perhaps you might be able to better interact with other people who are familiar with this as well. So there's cause and effect, which is the identical thing to actions and results, which is a simple premise of this. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, notice you can relax a little bit further. And that's a lot easier for the mind to grab a hold of because we set a context. We set a framework and followed through with the frame. You'll likely hear me say this time and time again. Whoever sets the frame and maintains it wins the influence. And it's, again, never that it's a competition of winners and losers, but it's, again, who can drive the communication. So in terms of our terminology here, you've got a cause or an effect, followed by an action or a result. If we want to go deep into the terminology here, this is identical to pacing and leading. To state something that's already sensory verifiably true. You're listening to the sound of my voice. You're aware of the environment around you. You're listening to this material, which is helping you to understand this more and more as I continue to explain it. And I just use the pattern on you in terms of this teaching module right here, that as this thing is happening, that thing is happening. When I say hey, you say ho, hey, this stuff works. Hopefully you played along there. Otherwise, that was very awkward. So cause and effect relationships, action, result, correlations, pacing and leading, we're all basically talking the same concept. Because as you're listening to this podcast here and starting to understand the basic concepts, maybe you're already seeing the ways you can start to interject these patterns into your communication. And as you're starting to make use of these communication patterns inside of your business and basically having more profound conversations and feeding back exactly what your prospect wants, they'll start to realize exactly how you are in sync with their goals and their outcomes, and your product is a perfect fit for what they're looking for. And I'm going to probably use the pattern over and over because there's 2 concepts I have to kind of explain here. One really a concept, the other a story. The first is the fact that this is how natural communication works. We're always looking at creating cause and effect relationships, even if it's the simple nature that when I'm driving home from my office today, I'm going to stop at the grocery store because it's on my way. And that logic only becomes true because I have presented a premise to myself in which it is. Meanwhile, I could have hit the grocery store on the way to my office. I've got a full refrigerator here where I could have stored the stuff if I really wanted to. Yet I've created the logic, I've created the premise that it makes more sense to buy things on the way home so I can load them more directly into my house. Which again, is only true because I've suggested that to myself. Now, in terms of putting this into use, a bit of a backstory. The first time that I began to learn these influential patterns, I read in some of the descriptions that all of this is based upon effective communication. These are, again, not techniques that were invented. Instead, they were methods that were discovered by tracking people who were effective at what they did. And as soon as I read that, I thought to myself, If it's based upon effective communication, why don't I just communicate this way all the time? To start to become aware of, again, the pacing statements of stating things that are already sensory verifiably true, basically getting in rapport with the unconscious processing of someone else's mind to then logically, naturally, and always ethically lead to the next step of what is that leading statement, what is that suggested premise that I can create. Which makes me now rewind part of my story back to like 2013 or 2014. That at that time I was teaching a hypnosis certification training. This wasn't meant for people in business. That was a course meant for people who wanted to learn the skills of professional hypnosis to work with their own private clients for things like losing weight, quitting smoking, overcoming fears, resolving stress, that sort of thing. And there's a woman who signed up for my training, and as she explained to me on the phone, she goes, Jason, I have been doing this hypnosis work for more years than you've actually been alive. However, my husband, now that he's retiring, he wants to join my business. And he says, who should I learn from? And she goes, there's a guy up in Virginia. They were traveling up from the Southeast. There's a guy up in Virginia that when I watch his videos, the way that he seamlessly just delivers these hypnotic language patterns, it is just smooth. It sounds so organic. And I can tell that he really is, making it up on the fly. It's not rehearsed. It's not planned. It's not scripted. But I've never seen anyone who can seamlessly just roll that stuff off naturally as Jason Linett does. And so the two of them traveled up to my training. And I'll tell you, when I hit this piece of content, which in that course was like on day 2 or 3, which as a result of what happened next, it's now the very first thing I do in all of my trainings. I explained it's all cause and effect relationships, which let's put this into a coaching or even therapeutic mindset for a moment. Because you've thrown out those cigarettes, it now helps you to realize that you're ready to take back control of your life. And as you continue to take back control of your life, every choice now becomes your own authority. And as you're making those positive choices for yourself, it just drives that meaning deeper into your thoughts that you are now a non-smoker and you're going to be a non-smoker for the rest of your life. And that was the context of how we would use that in a hypnotherapeutic change process. But then I began to unravel the communication and basically explain it was just cause and effect over and over and over. And the next cause was very likely the previous linking effect from the previous statement. Because now as you're realizing you're taking back control of your life, it's your decision, the choices that you make. And as it's your choice and decisions that you're making, you're now realizing just how much control you have. And as you're enjoying that control that you have, it's now every reason you're free of that old useless habit once and for all. And I see this look on her face as she suddenly goes, that's all you're doing? That's it? Oh, hell, I can do that. And now she does even better. So behind all of our communication is this very simple pattern. Because as you're recognizing the simplicity of this cause and effect relationship, perhaps it's helping you to realize the places in your life where you're already doing this. And as you're realizing the places where you're already doing this, chances are you might be able to look at copy you've written on a website, information you've written on a flyer, and begin to realize these patterns are already there. And again, as you continue to realize these patterns are already there, you're realizing that I'm someone who can help you to do this even more effectively, even more intentionally, even more purposefully, and by doing so, create even greater results, right? And it's where with a few simple refinements and a few specific applications of how to put this all into use, it kind of makes sense to join me inside of my programs. Yes, I realize what I just did there. I do that for the sake of benefiting you and seeing exactly how this all can start to come together. An action followed by a result, a cause followed by an effect, a pace followed by a lead. So as you're listening to the sound of my voice, you're realizing the ways that we can start to put this information together. And do you see the pattern that I just did there? What I just did was I used something sensory verifiably true, something that just gets that kind of response from your mind. In fact, the playful part of this is we can start to create agreements. We can start to create understandings in people's minds, even if the cause and effect relationship doesn't necessarily correlate. Now, this is the kind of playful part of this week's episode, which, again, notice how you might find yourself nodding in agreement, even though in advance I'm telling you some of these are going to be kind of silly. Because as you think about the weather and what weather patterns have been where you live right now, you're realizing that subscribing to this podcast is probably going to help you to better grow your influence in your business. Some of you might have been nodding to that, which even as I called out just how ridiculous that was, because there need not be any correlation. There doesn't have to be any correlation between the weather patterns in your own home neighborhood and the fact that subscribing to my podcast is going to help you to better sharpen your influence in your business. Though then again, the more you listen to my podcast, the more you're going to realize that there's probably many more patterns inside of hypnotic communication, and how it only takes one or two very specific words at the right time to better inspire your prospects to take action. And as you're realizing, even if just one client signs up with you as a result of what you've learned from me, and you take that client and probably now multiply that over a 10-year life cycle, the lifetime value of your client, you might be already realizing that the investment inside of one of my programs is a very tiny fraction compared to the income that you can likely create. I'm explaining this all as I'm doing it right now, which makes it even better because you can be aware of it. Because the beauty of this becomes, this is a fear that some people have as they start to learn this stuff. They start to wonder, wait a minute, will I be found out? Will I be caught? Especially if I ever share some of the rapport principles here on the podcast. It's likely going to be the very first blog post on the jasonlinett.com website, basically sharing the video and the transcript of my TED Talk, Rethinking Rapport. The whole mindset, though, is, again, I'm kind of jokingly explaining this all to you as we're doing it, and chances are it's still working. That's how powerful it is, because, again, our brains, our minds, our very neurological system is always looking for connections. It's always looking for associations. Because as you consider the dinner you had last night and think about the foods and the way that they tasted and the way they made you feel, and maybe perhaps how you slept last evening, you're realizing there are certain places where there's gaps in your communication, and a few influential patterns can better help you to drive more sales to your business in a positive way. I'm making a parody of this as I'm sharing this with you. And again, I want you to join me in the fun of this, because you're seeing how easy it becomes and how your mind begins to work. How we can let any one thing become the cause of something else. There's a concept of just creating associations. I'll look around my office right now, and I've got a tripod and I've got a TV. And let me just ask you a question right now. Which one is more important to you? A tripod or a television? And take a moment to yourself and really consider which one is more important to you. And here's the funny thing about this. If I tried now to convince you otherwise, you probably wouldn't agree with me. And you just invented that logic in your brain right now. Think about this, for example. Smartphones. Smartphones were something that we didn't have 20 or even 30 years ago. The very idea that we would have a device in our pockets that could make phone calls by video and had more technology in this little less than 1 pound weight device. More technology in that than what it took to get a space shuttle to the moon. But now we have logic around these devices. Oh, if I don't have a connection, if I hold it up high, that'll get a better connection. Or maybe this one, you've maybe done this one yourself. If I hold it under my chin, it turns my head into an antenna and I get a better connection. We start to believe these things. Or if my phone is not working well, it means, oh, that company's about to release the new one, and that means they're slowing down my current phone. Which maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But then again, if it's not working correctly, I can fire off this series of buttons on my phone to do a hard reset, and that's going to make it work better. We've invented this logic. These are premises and theories that did not exist many, many years ago. And you might even have different things in your own life, because those of you who might be close to my age, you might remember the violent sequence that was necessary to make your Nintendo Entertainment System work. you would beat that thing up. You would pound the sides. You would shove things inside, blow violently into the cartridge, and that would make the game work. When maybe it did, but then again, maybe it didn't. So consider again, this is how our minds work. So how do we start to use this in terms of business? Which, by the way, later on in this podcast series, I'll be revealing to you another pattern of hypnotic influence, which kind of levels up this cause and effect relationship. The basics behind cause and effect is you can let any one thing become the cause of another thing. Though I'll tell you now, there's another pattern we'll share later, which is a great reason to subscribe to this program now. Yes, that's logic I'm inventing right now, yet it happens to be true. Later on, I'll be sharing with you the premises and strategies of a complex equivalence, where you can let any one thing now become the meaning of another thing. Because the fact that you're still listening to this program means that you're serious about leveling up your business success. And the fact that you're serious about leveling up your business success means you're ready to make some investments inside of your own education to better create impact in your business, right? Ooh, more on that later. Let's keep this simple for now and just stick inside of cause and effect. Let me kind of rattle off some examples of this, and let me give you a simple pattern which you can use probably today. Put this to use. Once again, use your powers for good. Because the more you watch or listen to this presentation, the more you're realizing there's gaps in your communication. And the more you're realizing there's gaps in your communication, the more you're realizing that a few specific words and patterns at the right time can have more people inspired to take action from your website. And you might have been thinking in the past about the fact that, I just need a good search engine optimization person. I just need to pay for ads to bring more people to my website. Though the more you listen to me, the more you're realizing that it's not an issue of traffic, perhaps. It's an issue of increasing that user experience. You might have all the right darts, yet there's no dartboard yet for it to stick through. So rather than go off on the task of search engine optimization or even paid ads, which by all means are valid, you might begin to realize that now the most important thing you should be doing at this point is making the information on your websites, your videos, even the information on the back of a business card even more influential. Because as you consider what's already on your business card, the more you consider the information that's already there, the more you realize it's not telling people what appropriate steps to be taking next. And as you start to define what those appropriate steps are in the shape of your business, the more that people will be motivated to take action, to fill out your applications on your websites, to reach out and call you. And now the more people that are calling you, the more your confidence begins to grow as you're realizing that you can now speak and you can write and you can now communicate with better influence. And as you're discovering that better influence, it's helping you now to better create value inside of what you do, to put meaning and intention behind all of your communication. This is where I may need to remind you that we're going to transcribe every single podcast episode. And again, jasonlinett.com/the number of the episode. This is episode number 3, jasonlinett.com/the number 3. Because I'd encourage you, let's just put this in motion because it's more fun that way. I'd encourage you to go off and consider that here's the action, as you begin to read that transcript, you're going to start to see the specific applications in motion. And that's when you'll start to notice that I'm highlighting the applications in such a way that I'm creating new belief systems in the mind as soon as we rapidly can invent them. So as you're considering all the contract options and all the things that you've considered in terms of getting a car that's safe for your family, and you've made it a point that something with some entertainment features is correct, it helps you to realize that chances are the sooner you get into this car, the sooner you're going to have this problem satisfied in terms of that upcoming road trip, right? Yeah. So follow me over here. Let's start the paperwork. It's a very simple transition. It's a very natural mechanism, which again, I'd encourage. It's all about opening up our communication, listening to the person in terms of where they are, calibrating their readiness, because once again, the ethical disclaimer of all of this is do not drive someone into doing something that they don't want to do. The best pacing, the best cause-based statements, the best action statements are the ones that we elicit from the person. So this is where simply engaging in a conversation. This is where, as I like to say, small talk is no longer small talk. Instead, we are always eliciting belief systems. We are eliciting actions, beliefs, understandings, which as soon as we have that as the cause, we can link that to new meanings, to new understandings, to become even more influential. Because the more you begin to practice this pattern, the more you start to notice your confidence rising in terms of how easy it is. And the more easy it becomes to you, the more likely you're going to start to use this inside of all that we do. And the more you continue to clean your room on a regular basis, the more time we're going to have to go outside and play with the dogs in the backyard. Yes, use this on your kids if you have them. Use this in your relationships in a way that's always positive and mutually beneficial. Of course, that's always our goal here. But the mind creates correlations through cause and effect, which is why it's so powerful, so impactful, so powerful to start to create your own cause-effect relationships in your own business communication. You have been listening to the Hypnotic Language Hacks podcast with Jason Linett. Please stop everything and start exploring jasonlinett.com for even more business influence and persuasion resources. Make it a priority right now to subscribe to this program and listen to every episode, because the next one may reveal that one hypnotic influence secret to massively scale your success. Change your words, change your business, change your life. Get even more at jasonlinett.com.